So, in the second of our classic movies reassessed, we're going to look at the borderline polarising 1975 film Barry Lyndon.
Yeah, by Stanley Kubrick.
The great filmmaker.
Yeah, Barry Lyndon, I think, is... in order to discuss Barry Lyndon, I think we have to discuss Stanley Kubrick. Because a lot of critics think Stanley Kubrick is either the best thing ever or a cold sort of, he just makes films for robots.
Yes.
Barry Lyndon, which is looks very cold and has a lot of aspects that would lead you to think it was cold, is sort of the whipping boy for that. A lot of people who don't like Kubrick will absolutely hate this film. It's slow, it's very painterly with its looks.
Meandering.
Yeah.
I mean, like, in the context of Kubrick's career, Barry Lyndon follows two massive hits with 2001: A Space Odyssey, which redefined essentially what you could do with film.
Yeah.
There had been no film released on... there's been no film that had ever been released like 2001 on such a level, with such a big budget, and made such an artistic statement.
Yeah.
It made a huge impact on that generation, and continues to make huge impacts.
Yeah.
Kubrick follows this up with A Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
Huge and groundbreaking in its own way in terms of its handling of controversial subject matter.
Yeah.
So Kubrick at this point has licensed to do pretty much whatever the fuck he wants to do.
Yeah, both huge hits, can't be forgotten. Absolutely massive hits, 2001 and Clockwork Orange.
Apparently Clockwork Orange was the second most successful Warner Brothers film after My Fair Lady. Can you believe that? Released by Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
So Kubrick at this stage has the ability to do whatever he wants, and he gets interested in doing a film about Napoleon with Jack Nicholson, but that falls through.
Yeah.
Great shame that film never got made. But instead, Kubrick sticks to the realm of kind of costume dramas and decides to make an adaptation of William Thackeray's novel. I forget what it's called. It's something of Barry Lyndon.
The Adventures of...
The Adventures of Barry Lyndon.
Yeah.
And the film came out to incredibly mixed reviews, particularly from American critics. American critics criticised it for being too slow and cold and emotionless.
It's really long as well, isn't it?
Very
like 3 hours long.
3 hour film, yeah. While the European critics praised it. They said it was a work of art, and it's the most beautiful film ever made. And as time has gone by, critical appraisal has kind of turned around in favour of Barry Lyndon. Martin Scorsese says it's his favourite Kubrick film, and it is regarded among some circles as being Kubrick's best film. Still,
I think it's got very mixed. It's certainly rated lowly in the Kubrick canon.
Definitely, yeah. It's not talked about in the same breath. Amongst certain groups of people, it's not talked about in the same breath as The Shining or Full Metal Jacket or 2001 or Clockwork Orange.
No.
But we're going to launch into what we think about Barry Lyndon.
I haven't seen it for a few years, but I can remember some very good bits.
I watched the Blu-ray edition just last night.
This will be similar to our E.T. thing, because of none of the films, but you'll obviously have seen it recently, and I will have seen it far away, so we can talk about like that. Yeah. But yeah, I remember it being a very, very, very good, great, even film that looked absolutely amazing. Yeah,
but that's a completely fair assessment there. In terms of the visuals, it is probably one of the best shot films I've ever seen.
That's what sticks in my mind the most, how absolutely amazing it looks.
Every Kubrick film is kind of like a showcase for a technical innovation in camera work.
Yeah.
But what's best about Kubrick is that he uses technical innovations not to show off, but incorporates it as part of the story.
Yeah.
So 2001 made huge breakthroughs in visual effects in terms of models and how you visualise space, and he used that as an exploration of humanity's placement in the galaxy and the universe. Clockwork Orange used these bizarre, almost like anarchic cuts and techniques to convey the story of his troubled mind.
Yeah.
And Shining uses, of course, the Steadicam to wheel around the hotel, almost as like ghosts or spirits are following the characters.
A lot of intentional mistakes in that and all, which is really clever.
Yeah. And Barry Lyndon used a very specific sort of camera which allowed Kubrick to film stuff the way they would have been shot back in the 1800s, or 1700s. if he had cameras back in those days, which is to use naturalistic lighting.
Yeah.
So he uses candles to light scenes. He uses sunlight to kind of film, dining scenes. So visually, the film's amazing, and the period costumes are absolutely phenomenal. They look like they belong. They look correct and they look right. And Kubrick's use of the slow zoom, very slow zoomed out, and the kind of painterly way he pans across creates the illusion of an 18th century painting. Yeah. Essentially, that's what he's going for. So the story follows an Irishman, a kind of like a dull Irishman, played by Ryan O'Neal, called Redmond Barry. Yeah, Redmond Barry, who for a series of circumstances after killing an officer is forced to leave his home and go to Dublin. But along the way he's robbed and he has to make money somehow. So he joins the army before basically pussying out and being a deserter. And he ends up in the company of an aristocratic nobleman who he plays, helps him cheat at cards and make lots of money. And it's through there he meets a young woman who's a rich countess, and he's able to marry into this rich family. But essentially he destroys this rich family through a series of circumstances. And he returns to Ireland with no name, one less leg, and no money to his name, basically. So it's an epic, but at the same time it's almost like an anti-epic, because ultimately you're just following the life of this incredibly. He is quite he's I wouldn't call him dull, but
bland, isn't it?
I think he's dull in the literal sense. He's not very smart.
Yeah.
But he manages to get all this great fortune and wealth basically through no great talent of his own. He happens to come across all these circumstances, and it's by pure luck, really. I think Kubrick's using that as kind of like a discussion about, celebrity culture, maybe. That's my reading of it anyway.
Yeah.
How people are able to attain great wealth and great power basically through no great skill. They just come across it, or they're born into it.
Yeah.
And what Kubrick's really interested in, Barry Lyndon, is the small intricacies of this society. And I was watching the film, and you realise how ridiculous, how silly the societal norms are. Like, through one little action done at the start of the film, because Barry Lyndon's jealous because this officer's trying to make the hits on the girl that he fancies.
Yeah.
Through one tiny little fault of breaking his character, the whole thing falls apart. This officer intends to marry Barry Lyndon's cousin, but through one tiny little slip up in how to be polite, he just breaks the whole thing. It's like, oh, fuck it, I don't want to do it anymore. And what's even great is Kubrick almost like, because most of the film is shot in incredibly long takes, very long pans, very slow zooms. But then, like, when it all falls apart and the characters kind of break almost this act that they're doing, this polite act that they're doing, the camera comes shaky and the cuts are erratic, and it's very intentional. So, like, do you remember the scene when Barry Lyndon's like stepson comes in, and
is he the one that has the duel with him at the end?
Yeah.
I remember the duel itself. That's an amazing scene.
That is, yeah.
It takes absolutely forever, and it shows him cocking and everything.
Yeah. But that's one of the things that I find so interesting about how Kubrick is highlighting these societal norms, like the ridiculousness of duels. Yeah. It's silly. Like, there's all these rules and regulations they've got to follow. Like, you, Lord Bullington, will take the first shot. Failing the first shot, Mr. Lyndon will take his turn. And so essentially, I think what Kubrick's trying to get across in Barry Lyndon is that human needs, wants, and desires ultimately have stayed the same, irregardless of the societal norms that surround us. And essentially, societal norms are a bit weird when you think about it.
It sounds like it's about the ridiculousness of sort of placing rules on people that are so strict and
Barry Lyndon's kind of not allowed to kind of almost develop a personality.
Yeah.
He's expected to be polite and charming, but as we could tell, as the film shows, he's not that character. No. He's a coward. He's a very violent man. He beats his stepson. He doesn't really take responsibility for his actions.
Yeah.
And he's just a bit pathetic, really. But that's a Kubrick character. And the thing that's so interesting is it's very Kubrickian, but it's kind of not at the same time.
Yeah.
It feels almost like out of that canon. I think that's why maybe why a lot of people don't connect with it as much as his other films.
Yeah. Well, I must admit, because I watched it originally years ago, and I've got the Kubrick box set, the Blu-ray one now, and I've watched like The Shining and A Clockwork Orange a few times in it, and all the classics, even Eyes Wide Shut, which is a great film but is seen as being difficult. But like, I've never really gotten back into Barry Lyndon. For some reason, in my head, it seems to be like a really difficult one.
I know what you mean, because it's taken me 5 years to summon up the courage to actually sit down and watch it, and it's slow and it's difficult, but it's very rewarding. Yeah,
I remember it being really, really good. But yeah, why do you think then in his... Because pretty much out of later Kubrick, which is sort of Lolita onwards, Strangelove onwards, that's the classic period, isn't it?
I would include Lolita.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's Strangelove onwards though. But did Lolita come out after Strangelove, didn't it?
Lolita was before Strangelove.
Oh, Lolita onwards then. Yeah. So because that box set doesn't include Strangelove, I always thought it.
Yeah, it does include Strangelove, does it? Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought Strangelove. But yeah, I think that out of all the ones Lolita onwards, other than Eyes Wide Shut, this is seen as the difficult one that people don't really like.
If you love Kubrick, you'll love Barry Lyndon.
Yeah.
I think it's such a complex film, and it seems... I guess if you're going to kind of watch it, it seems like a formless film, because this character is essentially from falling from one misfortune to the next, but every scene has a purpose, and like I said, I think Kubrick's using the 1700s, like I said, as like this mirror to ourselves, essentially, and today's society. Barry Lyndon squanders this family's fortune on riches and stuff he doesn't need. He spends like £8,050 on a painting, which from their money to now money is ridiculous.
Yeah, billions, wasn't it? Well, hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands, yeah. It's like rampant consumerism and
well, it essentially leaves him empty, doesn't it? And
yeah. Ultimately, the character returns to Ireland penniless, without a leg, and no title to his name.
Yeah.
And the fact that his mother actively encouraged him to almost basically kill his stepson, because that's the only thing stopping him from getting the estate at the end. But the actors do a wonderful job.
He does die in the end, doesn't he?
No, Barry Lyndon does live.
Does he? I thought he's the one who loses the duel.
He does lose the duel.
Oh,
so the duel. But he's shot in the leg, so you have to chop his leg off.
Oh, right.
So he returns to Ireland with his mother. But all the actors are wonderful in the film.
Yeah.
I think Kubrick is... Because his reputation of dealing with actors, I think he's actually very much a very good director at drawing performances out of actors, and I think Barry Lyndon's a great example of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jack Nicholson's amazing in The Shining. Malcolm McDowell's stunning in Clockwork Orange. I think he does get... I can't think of any really bad performances in any of his films.
No, I can't either. But like in Barry Lyndon, he gets all these wonderful character actors to appear as these kind of archetypes throughout the movie. I think Ryan O'Neill's, he's great as Barry Lyndon.
Yeah.
He really holds it together well, and all the other characters he meets along the way, like Lady Lyndon, his wife. I think the actress who plays her is excellent. She's almost like the archetype of the quiet 1700s lady. Trying to keep it all together, but under it she's miserable and depressed, and she eventually goes mad after the death of her and Barry's son. She just completely loses it. That's it. But it's all about the way characters are expected to interact with each other, and the societal expectations. That's the way you interact towards each other.
Yeah.
And when people don't really say what they mean, no one really says what they want in Barry Lyndon. Only that this is what is expected of us. So it's a rich, deep film, which I would more than definitely rewatch.
Yeah.
I think its classic status is completely deserved. It's as good as anything Kubrick has ever made.
Do you think then it's underrated?
Yes.
It pretty much is just seen as like middling Kubrick.
Yeah.
I know it's obviously not going to be seen as shit because everyone likes Kubrick.
Like I said, there are some circles that consider it to be Kubrick's best film.
Yeah.
I think Sight and Sound, I think, ranked it really high. Kaiju Cinema rank it really high. I think most more European publications say it's one of Kubrick's best films.
Yeah.
American audiences, not as much.
No.
It doesn't have moments that are as iconic as The Shining or as Clockwork Orange, but in terms of like the technique and I actually found the story really engaging. I found the characters all really interesting.
Yeah.
But I think you know, give it a go.
Yeah.
Even if you're not into, I don't like costume dramas.
Yeah.
I can't stand them normally, but I think with this one, Kubrick created such a depth to the story, the characters, and the technique that there's more than enough for people to enjoy.
Yeah.
And it's such a rich film, filled with great scenes and moments and characters and lines of dialogue and performances and images that just stick with you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's really underrated.
Underrated. So I've had one that's been on track, E.T., one underrated one.
We need an overrated now.
Yeah. Well, I'll be watching Jurassic Park next. That'll be my next choice because sleeping with Spielberg, and I've never seen Jurassic Park. So yeah, we've got. But yeah, Barry Lyndon, summing up then.
It's a superb movie. It's littered with great performances, an engaging and interesting story, complex thematic material, brilliant filmmaking technique, and leaves you with an overall plenty to chew on.
Exactly.
And it'll just live on forever for people to talk about what Barry Lyndon's all about, like any other Kubrick film.
Barry Lyndon, excellent film. Stay for Jurassic Park.